Welcome, loves. I'm Paula, your death walker and death literacy educator. This is our June question and answer, where I talk honestly about autonomy, sovereignty, and dying on one's own terms, and what it means to navigate the current healthcare and death care system that is collapsing in real time in 2026. These questions come from people who are trying to reclaim their power at the end of life. So let's go ahead and begin. Question number 1 comes from Sarah Lee, and she's out of Detroit. What does a sovereign death actually look like, she asks, and how do I create one in a collapsing system? Excellent question. So let's go ahead and dive right into the answer. A sovereign death is one where the dying person's wishes lead the room. I'm going to say that again. A sovereign death is one where the dying person's wishes lead the room. Not the system, not the family, and not all the fears that people have not been able to successfully discuss before this particular moment. The dying person is the one and only person in the room that actually matters. Everyone else is there for support. Think of them like the backstage hands at a performance. You have your lighting and your sound and your set builders, and that's what the outside circle is. The inside circle is the dying person. They are at the core of the room. And the room needs to be balanced. And this is where death walking, this is where death doulas come in, to keep that balance, to hold that space in a sovereign vibration, if you will. It looks like clarity, preparation, and boundaries. We forget to set boundaries when we get into that last little bit of crisis in the death and dying process. Everybody all of a sudden, there's no boundaries. And the reason that is because they weren't set prior. The boundaries belong in preparation. Honesty, in my opinion, is clarity. So when I speak of clarity, I am talking about being absolutely honest on every single solitary level in the preparation stage, whether it's uncomfortable, whether it's fearful, whether it's joyful. Every single solitary preparation and plan needs to be laid out. And not just one plan. How about 2 plans? It looks like choosing where you want to die, who is present, and what interventions you accept and what you refuse. This is very important. It looks like choosing where you die. How about when you die? Just like with medical aid in dying, which I advocate strongly for. Not every human being on this planet is meant to go right into hospice. It's not a go around the game board and look, you get a free ride into hospice. And that's the way it is portrayed. It is portrayed as a monopoly. No pun intended when I use that game. Honestly, I didn't have that coming up. This is also making sure that the dying person has been listened to and everything has been put down in writing, including what you want and, again, what you don't want. In a collapsing system, sovereignty requires paperwork. I know that sounds horrible, and I would love to go back to the ritual-rooted community where people just gathered and brought their plant medicines, and a doctor came in periodically and helped with comfort. And basically, we just let nature, plant medicine, and a little bit of medical guidance lead us all into, at least led most of my ancestors into their final moments and into their death. Unfortunately, we live in the United States of America where nothing can get done, nothing can get done without paperwork and triplicate. without it being notarized and scrutinized and all that stuff. I am sorry to say, but everything in this country requires paperwork. And it is to the dying person's benefit. Hear me now, for all those that are looking at their time getting shorter and shorter and what their end of life really looks like. Not actually the dying process, but what does it look like up until then? And then how does it change? In this collapsing system, you must have an advocate, period. This is where death doulas, death walkers, especially ones that are community based, especially ones that are old school, if you will, the ones that, for me, in my childhood, doctors were not a management program for us. We had 10 children, plus my mom and dad, plus my grams, plus my grandpa, plus anyone else who was currently residing on the ranch with us. So we were taught that there is a plant for everything that ails people in this country. And that is what we use to maintain our health growing up. The other side of the coin is, and my mom and my grams and my dad all agreed, if you're on a horse and that horse bucks you off and you fall off and you have a bone sticking out of your elbow now, there isn't a single solitary plant that you can rub or wrap a leaf around that's going to fix that bone. So yes, the medical community in my household growing up was trauma and emergencies. So advocate. Pick an advocate. Pick someone, as a dying person, pick someone who has no dog in your race. Seriously. They are there strictly for you. The other thing that's required is conversations long before the threshold arrives. Don't wait until everybody's in crisis mode and the bells and whistles are going off and people are running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Sovereignty is not a feeling. I'd like everyone to remember that. It's a structure that you build. And I hope that helps a little bit. Question number 2. This comes from GH. How do I protect my end-of-life choices when my family disagrees? This happens more than people would like to think. Most people think that, families are, they're in the mode of the dying person is leaving this place in time and we want to make things run smoothly and, we want them to leave. That may happen in the movies. That may happen on TV. That may even happen in a book that someone reads. But on an everyday level, as someone who sits by bedsides, I run across the family disagreeing in more ways than I can possibly even begin to describe in this particular video. So, how do you do that? You protect your choices by putting them in writing once, twice, 3 times. You name 2 medical proxies, 2, and make sure that somehow they do not have anything to gain while being your proxy. Make sure they have no dog in your race, like I said, and make sure they will honor everything that you have written down in your will, in your advance directive, in your pulse, all of these. Then you want to remove decision-making power from anyone who cannot and will not abide by what is written out by the dying person. You physically remove them. You physically state that that's a boundary that I was talking about. Love does not equal alignment, people. Your death is not a group project. I know America likes to think my death is going to be a group project because of the manner in which I choose to die, or plan B that I have. But you know what? Kiss it, folks. When you die, you can plan it any way you want. When I die, it's none of your business unless I've asked you to be part of the circle, part of my end of life tribe. Choose the person who will carry out your wishes without hesitation. This isn't as easy as people think it is. And the reason I said have two medical proxies is because you never know what's going to happen. What if one of those proxies die before you do? What if there's a falling out? What if all of a sudden their values or something changes in their aspect and they are no longer on the dying person's side or the soon-to-be dying person's side? This can all be done as early as palliative care. It can even be done years before anyone actually gets to that palliative care and then end of life process. Do not choose the person who will crumble under pressure. If they're going to crumble under pressure, then absolutely any other family members who have a stronger personality, and when that person crumbles under pressure, that's a boundary that's been broken. Now they can get in there and they can do and mess with it and meddle and think it's a community project and make it all about them. This is so very, very important. Who you decide is going to carry out every one of your wishes, every one of your directions, every one of your boundaries. They're going to stand tall. They won't crumble. They won't break down. They're not going to concede. They are there for one person and one person only, and that is the person who is actually going to die. So I hope that helps. Question number 3. This was written by Lyle. What are the red flags that a healthcare team is no longer aligned with the dying person's wishes? From my perspective, when I work with people as a death walker, I work most of my time that I am actually working with someone is during the advocacy and the preparation time. We have long talks. I work with people and families months before the palliative care comes in, months before the actual hospice comes into effect. That is my preference. That is when I like to step into the circle so I can observe, because that's what I am. I'm an observer. So one of the things that I do is I do attend with a lot of clients. I go to their palliative care. I sit in as extra ears and eyes. So that's a real good thing. First of all, make sure you have someone in the room with the dying person, even 2 people who give extra eyes, extra ears, and can actually process. And they're observing. They're not in the situation. Sometimes when the caregiver and the dying person go to the healthcare team, they're so boundly and wrapped tightly into the situation. Pick someone who can observe, who can stand outside the circle and go, that's not right. Hold up, back up, back up. I want to be clear what you said. Say that again. So some of the red flags that I would call out right off the bat are pushing treatment that the patient doesn't want, like 94 years old and needing a hip replacement. Why? Ignoring advanced directives. This happens more than people would realize, really. There are just some nurses, or I won't even say nurses, there are some healthcare professionals that just simply feel like it's their business to ignore advanced directives and to get all up in someone else's dying process. Using fear-based language. I haven't run into it too much over the many years that I have been advocating with patients and clients. Excuse me. I'm just getting over a cold. So I don't speak a lot about the fear-based language, because once that happens, that now becomes, in my opinion, a physical, verbal, mental, that becomes some sort of abuse, and that would immediately be reported by myself to the institution's patient advocate or whatever needed to be done. Refusing to discuss comfort-focused care. And this goes back to pushing treatment. These two go kind of hand in hand. A lot of people at some point, they're just like, no, I don't want to do anything else. I just want comfort care. A lot of times we still have people that I have run into the profession, and they are still out there in huge numbers. And that's treating death as a failure. You know, somehow you've got to, don't use the word death, don't use the word dying. We don't say those things. We're all about living and making it through and you know, toughing it out, and we shall overcome. This is not only gaslighting, in my opinion, but it is also not, it is not clarity. It's not honesty. You're treating death as a failure instead of a natural outcome. Here's the bottom line. These beautiful meat bags or bioorganic bodies or whatever you choose to call it, they are temporary. We were birthed in them, we live in them, and then they expire, and that's it. You know, when they had an expiration date the minute you took your first breath, that death clock started ticking. So be mindful. When the team stops listening, that is my biggest and foremost answer on this one. When you start noticing that the people around you, the people that are calling themselves your team, when they stop listening, when they stop respecting boundaries, or when they start talking to the family instead of the most important person in this whole equation, the dying person. When alignment is gone, that is the final red flag. That is the emergency brake being pumped. Alignment is crucial. And I know people go, ooh, that's woo-woo stuff. Balance, alignment, centering. No, it's not. Alignment is when everybody is on the same page. When everybody understands with honesty, clarity, and in basic everyday language terms what the dying person wants and respects that. Question number 4. This person didn't leave any initials or names, so that's fine. The question is, how do I avoid being overtreated at the end of life? This happens a great deal, especially for those who are institutions, who are in hospitals, rehabilitation centers, dementia homes, Alzheimer's homes, nursing homes. Overtreatment, the first thing I want to say is overtreatment is the default in our system. We just overtreat everything. And we just throw it all out there and say, okay, let's see where it lands. To avoid that, you need a clear advance directive, a post, a medical proxy who will enforce your wishes, and a refusal sign, consent forms, and that you don't understand. You need to be able to refuse to sign consent forms that you don't understand. If you don't understand, and your medical proxy has, you know, they're on the side of the institution or that, then you should address who your proxy is, because they're not working in your best effort. The dying person or the death walker or death doula, whoever, this is for you. Say the words, comfort-focused care only. Comfort-focused care only. And I say to memorize that phrase, just like when you're arrested. What's the phrase that Everyone is told when you're arrested, I want a lawyer. I want a lawyer. This is the same premise. Say the words, I want comfort-focused care only. No life prolonging interventions. No hospital transfers. Put it in writing and repeat it as often as you can. Every time you go to your doctors, every time you check in with your teams, make sure that the conversation, if you, the dying person, are still able to speak, then absolutely, I want comfort-focused care only. I do not want life-prolonging interventions or no life-prolonging interventions. No hospital transfers. Keep repeating this. Sound like an old broken record that just keeps repeating and repeating and repeating. It is vital and it will make a difference. Okay, question number 5. This one is for, I hope I pronounce this right, Shakita? Anyways, this question is, what happens when hospice refuses or fails to provide adequate care? Okay, first thing that you should know, I am not one of the seasoned death walkers that 90% of my clients are hospice, are willing to go into hospice. I have some that is the path that they're choosing to work. More than half of the people that I currently work with, hospice is the last place they want to end up. They absolutely refuse to do hospice. And it doesn't matter why or what their reasonings are or anything. They're the ones that are going to be dying. And my sole purpose is to make sure that their wishes are honored. So, with me saying that the number of people that I have walked with into hospice, I have spent months with them beforehand. So we did prepare everything in writing. So the best I can tell you for this one is that this is more common than people realize. And it's going to be happening more and more with the medical industry collapsing, with healthcare falling apart. It's going to be less staffed. It's going to be less funded. We're already seeing in the rural areas where palliative care and even hospice doesn't even exist without driving 100 miles or putting your loved one into a hospice facility. A lot of rural counties and families do not get the option hardly anymore of having home hospice because there's no one to do it, that's a whole different deal. So when hospice fails, families must become advocates, and this is so hard. That's why it's so important to make sure that the proxies that you name, they are not going to collapse and under pressure. They're not going to be scattered and unorganized. They are strong. They are fierce. They are all about the dying person. So for me, that's what people call me for, as the death walker. I have no problem standing up and going, hey, what are you guys doing? Oh, you don't have enough people to come out? That's not our problem. That sounds like a hospice problem. And this goes on in any situation that we're talking about. I'm an advocate in any. I'm just using hospice because it relates to this particular question. Call the hospice supervisor. Number 1, request a new nurse. You absolutely have the right to request a new nurse. You can even request a new hospice doctor if they are not listening and abiding by what the dying person and their families have put in writing. They are not the leading experts anymore. They're not. The dying person is the expert because they're the ones dying. Document everything. If you have a nanny cam, if you have a phone recorder, if you are great with notes on your computer and you have an AI agent, use it. Document everything. Hold that institution to every single solitary thing that they say, they write, they do. What else can I think on that? If needed, fire the agency and switch to another. Seriously, just because you are in with this particular agency, and if they have dropped the ball, if they are no longer serving the dying person in the manner to which they have specifically written out, documented, legally tendered, and everything, fire them and find someone else. You have that right. You are, just because you are in with an agency, you are not tied to that agency. You are not at their mercy. They work for you. That's supposed to be the deal. They are there for you, for the dying person. And if that doesn't happen, then fire. You are allowed to demand competent care, at the very least. You should be demanding exceptional care. But the bottom line is, you should absolutely demand competent care. I don't think that that is asking too much from these institutions in the most vulnerable part of the aspect. It's not, it's just as vulnerable as birth. So, okay, I'm going to let that one go. Question number 6. This one was by, Tatiana. How do I talk to my doctor about stopping treatment without being dismissed or pressured? This goes a lot to the question that I answered above, when you want to just kind of, not be pressured into having more treatments and not giving up the ghost and keep moving forward and you can beat this and yada, 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 yada. So I guess for me, I'm going to answer this in the most honest and direct way that I know. Use direct, ambiguous language. I am choosing quality over quantity. I am done with curative treatment. I want comfort-focused care only. Can you do that? Are you willing to provide that? If you are not willing to provide that right now as I'm speaking to you, then I request another doctor. I request that you be removed from my team. And if the dying person needs a death walker or a death doula or someone in their corner to say those things, then by damn, you say them. Because if you are truly in service for the dying person, and even and their family includes that too, their circle includes that as the outer rim, then you must use clear, ambiguous, forceful, decisive language. Here's the thing, and I'm going to say this. I have nothing against doctors or nurses. I really don't. I know a lot of times it sounds like I'm just after them, but no. They have their place in our society. They have overstepped their boundaries in so many other areas of people's health and their lifestyles. But again, that's another story. So I'm going to say this in the doctors and the medical healthcare profession. Doctors are trained to fight death, not accept it. That's our fault as a society. We actively send these human beings to medical school and we train them to fight death. We train them literally to fight every dying person at the end of their life, like some sort of little bout. Oh. And I don't understand it. Again, I think that's another issue that needs to have the script flipped. I think that every doctor, I don't care if you're a general practitioner, I don't care if you're a gastrologist, I don't care what your little individual niche is. I think every doctor, every single solitary doctor should have to sit by at least 100 bedsides of dying people. From rural people to backwoods people to urban people to acute treatment to long-term chronic, I think that that should just be part of the curriculum. So remember, your clarity protects you. So if you are being clear and honest and you can decipher how clear they are being, that's to your betterment. I say this, bring an advocate. Bring two if you can. The more ears, the more eyes, and the more brains that can process the information and figure out if the system is for you or against you. Bring your paperwork every single solitary time. Tell them to make copy. After, I don't care if you go to the doctor 5 times a month. Make sure they copy your paperwork 5 times that month. And remember, you don't need anyone's permission to stop treatment. No one's. That is still autonomy. That is still your sovereignty. That is still your right as a human being. We don't have many left in America when it comes to healthcare or death care, but we still have that one. And it is so important that every person, whether you're dying or not, remember, you do not need anyone's permission to stop treatment at any time of the game. Number 7, what does medical abandonment look like? And how can families prepare? This one didn't have anyone who wrote their names, so it just says anonymous on it. This question is a little bit more technical than I can probably get into for this little short segment. So let me go ahead and just answer it in this very broad term fashion. Medical abandonment happens when the system quietly steps back because there is nothing left to bill for. I know it's harsh, but it is the absolute reality of the very first answer to this question. Medical abandonment happens when the system quietly steps back because there is nothing left to bill. There is no more money to be siphoned. There is no more insurance forms where they can make a profit off of the very last moment in a person's life or last months, years in a person's life. It looks like delayed responses. We've all had this. You send in a question or you ask a nurse a question or whatever, and all of a sudden their responses are slower and slower. And sometimes even when you go into the doctor and you're asking for the responses for the questions that you've already said, they will bypass them. They will quietly move the subject to whatever they're choosing to move. Another sign is reduced visits, missing equipment. They can't get you this equipment. They haven't been able to send you that. Oh my gosh, there was a delivery issue. Oh, we forgot. The shipper does whatever. These are all signs, man. The last thing is families being told to wait it out. Just wait it out. We'll get it all together. Just come on, wait a little bit more. We're getting it all organized. So you can take that for what it's worth. What does preparation mean? Preparation means learning basic caregiving skills, having supplies on hand, and knowing who to call when the system disappears. Abandonment is predictable. Preparation is power. I hope that answers it. I should probably do a podcast on maybe that question alone. We'll see how that goes somewhere. But that's a really good question, Anonymous, and thank you so much. Question 8. This is from Jacob. How do I create a death plan that actually works in a system that ignores patient autonomy? And he writes in thing, I am in a rural community that is very small, and we already have shortages beyond what anyone here ever had imagined. We have no palliative care teams, as well as hospice. The nearest hospice nurse must drive 108 miles. Return trip, I guess, is what he meant to say. So thank you for that little introduction, and you are not alone, my friend. I get so many calls about, how can myself as a death walker, how can I help you? How can I help you prepare? How can I give you resources to use in that community when no one else will? So a real death plan is not some sort of pretty document. It really is a strategy. It really is a hardcore planning session, when you have a birthing plan, or when you're bringing a child into the earth, or when you're getting ready to go off to college. You have strategies. When you're paying for your kids' colleges, you put down a financial strategy for your retirement. Well, a death plan is the same thing. It's a strategy. It's not some little woo-woo document that, gets wrapped up with in a pretty blue envelope, and it has a leather thing around it. I mean, that's what it looks like. It's a great image on the outside, but is it just a pretty document? Or when you open that up, is it a full-blown strategy? What that includes is a medical proxy, and I've told you 2 of them, who will enforce your wishes. A post signed by a clinician, a clear refusal of unwanted interventions. Tell them clearly what you don't want. I don't want you to crack my chest. I don't want to be intubated. I don't want a chest tube. I don't want chemo. I don't want radiation. I want to be resuscitated for no more than 9 minutes. After 9 minutes, please let me go. A plan for home health, if desired. You have to put this down if you're going to have home health. A list of who is allowed in the room at the end of towards the end of the process, and who is not. A backup plan. Have a plan A, have a plan B, have a plan C, for God's sake. Because the current system that we have right now is constantly, daily collapsing, breaking piece by piece by piece. So by the time you get to your dying process, there may not be a plan A anymore for you. So have a plan B and a plan C. A death plan only works when it's enforceable. It cannot be just inspirational or spiritual. You have to put it into action. You have to take that matter, that actual piece of paper, and you have to put it into action so that it can be enforceable. Let's do question 9. This is from Abigail. Let's see. What are my rights if I want to die at home? And what systems will try to interfere? Okay, I will do this one because I'm sure everybody else has not answered your question because they're afraid to rock the boat, or they're going to piss some people off or whatever. So, welcome, and I will answer this from my experience of being outside of the whole in-house hospice programs. You have the right to die at home. Period. You have the right to refuse hospitalization. Period. You have the right to decline treatment, period. So remember those 3 or 4 lines. You have the right to die at home. You have the right to refuse hospitalization. You have the right to decline any and all treatment. The systems that may interfere, the number one that I have seen across the board in this country is your EMS. Oh my God. I do not know the logistics of this profession. I do not know much of the training other than what I have just jacked into and, researched to use with, my clients and my families that we've had to just, bone up on and go, oh dear God. EMS is one of the most difficult systems to navigate and get wishes done for the dying. They work outside the circle. They have a whole different parameter of things that they can and can't do, and it's very, very hard to get an EMS team to abide by whatever the home wishes are of the dying. If you have a DNR, please make sure that that is firmly planted in your window if they come to your house. Please make sure that it is firmly next to the person who's being serviced. Make sure that it's open in their wallet so people can see. Have a copy. Make sure you have one on the refrigerator for any reasons. Make sure that if there is a caregiver or some sort of home health aide, a death doula, a death walker, someone, a family member, someone, make sure that they have that thing going, here you go. This is a do not resuscitate. This is a do not resuscitate. Please abide by this. One of the other, there's uninformed family members. This I've seen a few times. It doesn't really, it plays itself out okay as long as there's a mediator or somewhere in between. I fall into that category on many occasions, and other times I just put the family in a room and they worked it out. The last one that wants to fight it every single solitary turn is the medical professionals. And their sole reason is they fear the liability, or for some reason, now all of a sudden they have some sort of morals and values that goes against whatever the end of life wishes are. Then you need to recuse yourself and you need to stop being the primary physician. Period. End of conversation. So if that happens, you as the caregiver, as the advocate, as the proxy, medical proxy, if you find for 1 minute that all of a sudden your team has a moral or has some sort of religious conflict, then they need to recuse themselves and immediately find you another professional. Your paperwork, your proxy, your clarity, they are the shield for you. Home death is legal. It is legal in every state in America. Home death is legal. But you must prepare for the pushback. Because again, like I said earlier, sometimes the state, the city, the community, somehow they think that your death is their community project. It's not. So it is legal. And when you push back, be prepared to say things like, this isn't about you. This is about this person dying. Feel free. When you die, write it any way you want. But you're not going to overtake this dying person's wishes because it goes against your morals. Then you shouldn't be helping this person because you're harming them. So, the last question of the session. And this one is from Myra. How do I help someone die on their own terms when the system or the family is pushing against them? And this is more from a advocate. She is an advocate, and she is siding with the caregiver and the dying person. The family is the ones that are causing the friction, so to speak. And I just thought I'd be clear on this particular question and why it got answered. To my understanding, she has also been asked as a friend, but she also has done end of life training as well. So, but she is there as the second medical proxy. And so this is how I'm going to answer this question. You become their advocate, period. You become their witness and their boundary keeper. So you're the observer. You're standing on the outside of the circle and you're watching all this chaos, all this unbalance, all this, the vibrations are anything but in aligned with how the dying person is going to end their life. So this is where I go back to make sure your advocate, your death doula, your death walker, your proxy, whatever name you're giving that human being, make sure that they are fierce. Make sure that they are absolutely, without a doubt, on your team. They will put their lives and everything on the line to make sure that the dying person wishes are done. One of the things too that you should do is you should speak the wishes out loud. Even if the dying person is speaking, even if the caregiver is speaking them, you be louder. You bring those people together and you sit them down and you actively speak those wishes. It's funny. A lot of people, they won't hear it coming from the ones they love, but they'll hear it from you because you're an outsider. Because you're the voice that cracks the noise that's going on right now. You protect their space. You remind the room every day, this is their death, not yours. Back off. You remove people who cannot honor that process. They don't need to be around. They're not going to add to balance. They're not going to add to alignment. They're not going to add to the peaceful ending of someone's life. Then they have no business being there. You challenge the system when it oversteps, and I've gone through all the questions to do that. Dying on one's own term requires a circle that can hold the line. And unfortunately, and that's the gap, I think, that a lot of the thresholders, the death doulas, the death walkers, the death care workers that are now entering this field, it's holding the line. Because the medical system, the healthcare system, they can't hold the line anymore. They're collapsing. They're broken. So someone now has to step up and hold the line. It's just like the firefighters on the front line. It's just like Doctors Without Borders. It's your, missionaries who, are holding the front line. And that's the story of it. So I want to thank you all so much for joining me for this Q&A session for the month of June. And yes, it did go a little bit longer. So I hope there's some really valid information. These conversations matter because sovereignty matters. And if you have any questions for July's Q&A, please leave it in the comments, or you can send it privately into my email at adamspaula90@gmail.com. Until next time, take a breath, tell the truth gently, and remember, your death is your threshold, and you deserve to meet it on your own terms. Thank you all so much. Goodbye.